Hello everyone and welcome to the Dr. Janine Show. I'm Dr. Janine Bowering, naturopathic doctor, and we're talking today about a very interesting subject. This is all about secrets of how to do intermittent fasting, and I've got some tips and some tricks to make it easier. We're going to talk about different types of fasting today. We're going to talk about autophagy, and we'll also go into a little bit about the history of fasting, but also I'll be sharing a great exercise. So we're going to do a visualization that you're going to join me. We're going to do it together to help you in the autophagy and our body's cleanup mechanism, but more about that to come. So be sure that you stay tuned right into the end of the video. And thanks for joining me today. Be sure to subscribe to our channel so you always get our newest and latest uploads. Make sure that you give me a big thumbs up, and also make sure that you click the bell. So turn on your notifications so you always get our newest and latest shows that we share, but we also have shorter segments of the show that we share every week, so you can really, pick and choose exactly what you want to watch and the segments of the Dr. Janine Show. So thanks again. If you've got your questions and comments, please put them in the comment section below. I've actually got access today, so I'm going to do my best because the cameras are on me, but I'm going to be looking at you as well and answering your questions if I can, and if I, bear with me because it's my first time doing this and doing it live. Okay, so what is fasting? So the history of fasting, for anybody who is part of any type of religion, you may have done fasting for religious purposes. And the whole idea is that when you're fasting and decreasing your food consumption, that it actually increases your spiritual and intuitive abilities. And it's a way to connect with that higher power, whatever you believe in. So it really is interesting that most religions have some sort of fasting. We know that in Ramadan, so for the Muslims, this is something that has actually been studied. And when we take a look at this study, we can see that the effectiveness of increasing the cognitive abilities as part of fasting, even including memory deficits, has been proven, and that is really interesting to take a look at that. So certainly, other forms of fasting have been studied, but this is something that even in, mainstream scientific literature, this is something that has been evaluated. Now, what is fasting? Part of the definition of fasting is that it's a behavioral modification. We're going to be talking a little bit about behavior and how the mind-body connection is really relevant when we're talking about fasting. And what it does on a physiological realm is that it actually causes disruptions in our glucose and our lipid metabolism. So for anybody, I know you're going to stay tuned, because when we talk about this, my Mr. Fat Prop, this is just 5 pounds of fat, and certainly there are proven benefits of fasting, and certainly intermittent fasting and different types of fasting on helping with weight loss. So let's talk about some of those different types of fasting. Well, there's certainly intermittent fasting, which we'll get to in a second, but fasting can either be dirty or clean. So this is really interesting, and the type that I personally prefer is dirty fasting. So if you've tried dirty fasting, if you don't not yet know what that is, that means that it's not just water. So you're actually introducing and allowing yourself to have some coffee during your fasting, which is fantastic. And this is, as opposed to clean fasting. Clean fasting is typically just water and water alone during the fast. So I find it easier to be able to incorporate a little bit of coffee as a crutch, let's put it that way. But there are benefits of coffee at increasing, our metabolic rate and helping to target belly fat especially. So I see the benefits of, not having it to be too difficult in the midst of doing my own fasting when I allow myself to have some coffee. So we'll talk about what's allowed and what's not allowed a little bit later on in this video today about what drinks can we have and what are some of the best drinks to have during your fast. Now there's time restricted eating. So time restricted eating and intermittent fasting are synonymous. So they're basically the same thing. And the most popular one is probably the 16-8. And what this means is that you're restricting your eating window to 8 hours of the day, and 16 hours is your fasting time. So for example, if you start eating at 12 noon, then you would allow yourself to eat between 12 noon and 8 p.m. on that one day, and then no food, so only water, then from 8 p.m. until 12 noon the next day, and that would be your 16 hours. So that's the most common. There's also the 18-6, so 6 hours of your feeding window, and a more prolonged would be a 20-4, so 20 hours of fasting and just 4 hours of eating. So my recommendation here is that if you're new to fasting, this is the best way, in my opinion, to ease your way into fasting, is to do the intermittent or time-restricted eating. And this type of fasting allows you to get past some of those mental aspects of fasting, which we're going to talk about in just a second. And it's an easier way if you're going to one day try a more prolonged fast. So maybe it's a complete 24-hour, 48-hour, a 3, 4, 5-day fast. If that's in the cards for you, then this is the best way to ease your way into it. And I probably would never recommend actually doing a more prolonged fast for days unless you've done the intermittent fasting first. And that's certainly the way that I did it to get myself into the whole thing about fasting, because it's not something that I did growing up. It wasn't, part of our religious practices. It wasn't part of anything that I was accustomed to. So I had to be able to train myself to fast. And by starting with the intermittent fasting, this was the easiest way for me to do it. So that was, a great tool. There's also alternate day fasting. So 5 days of the week, you're fasting. So you could fast one day and then you could not fast the next day and eat, and often when people actually prescribe this, so nutritionists and dietitians and some doctors will prescribe alternate day fasting for various health reasons. And usually on the days when you're not eating, you're still allowed a little bit of calories, so not a lot. But then on your fasting and your non-fasting day, you are eating a healthy diet. So there may be benefit in that for people, certainly with certain health conditions like diabetes, that when this is prescribed for you, that this may be the way to go. You're just in a caloric restriction, which can help with weight loss, but also helping with insulin sensitivity. And of course, there's the prolonged fast. So whether that's a 1, 2, 3, 5-day fast, drinking water, and if you're going to do the dirty fast, that would include having some coffee, but that would be certainly something that you would ease your way into, and starting with the intermittent fasting would be the way to go. Now, there's something also called OMAD. So OMAD is 1 meal a day. So this is a great tool for some people. It's definitely time restricted because you are having one healthy meal a day. And don't think that you can have a bunch of junk food in that one meal a day. You're having one healthy plate of food, and you're eating that food within a 1 hour time span. And that's the OMAD. I know a lot of people have had a lot of success with this type of fasting. And is it something that I recommend? Well, I'd say maybe for a short amount of time. Fasting is not something that you should always be doing. It's something that you should be rotating, because we don't want your metabolism to downregulate at all times to that lower caloric intake. And that's important, because a lot of people who talk a lot about fasting and they say to do it all the time, I don't necessarily agree with that. We don't want to, as I said, the less calories you eat, your metabolism downregulates. And so doing this in a proper way in which you're taking breaks from the fast is definitely recommended. Now, there's something that was also coined by Dr. Valter Longo, and this is called fasting mimicking. So sort of allowing your physiology to believe that it's in the fasting state, and it has a lot to do with that higher fat, lower carb, keto sort of diet, and moderate amounts of protein, but you're in that calorie restricted state for 5 days. And this really helps with getting your body into something called autophagy, which is its own cleanup mechanism, which we'll talk about in just a second. And that usually starts at around day 3 on this fasting mimicking protocol. So it's something definitely that is an interest. I've not yet tried it myself, and if you have, I'd love to hear from you. There's certain companies that they package this all together for you so you don't have to think about it. But yeah, it's an interesting theory, and certainly in different, cultures, that this type of eating is something that's more mainstream in Europe, especially, and it's something to consider, absolutely. But again, that's going to be a 5-day prolonged fast where your caloric intake is vastly reduced and you're in that ketosis state, which definitely has its benefits. So it's something that, maybe one day I will try it and I will give you my opinion, but I'd love to hear from you if you have tried it and that's something that you have experience with. Now, certainly not everybody should fast. So who should not fast very specifically certainly in pregnancy. So if you're pregnant, and also nursing moms certainly should not be fasting, because that's not recommended, and you can't suffer, the relatively, dramatic caloric restriction. That's not something that's recommended. Certainly for some people with different disease conditions, so that could be diabetics, that could be other, disease processes that you would definitely not. It's not to say that diabetics can't fast, but this is something that you're definitely working with your healthcare practitioner to make sure that you're doing it in a safe way. And it actually can be very helpful for diabetics, but again, depending on if you're on medication or insulin, this is something that you have to work with your practitioner. There's also something called leptin resistance. And if you are leptin resistant, this is something that it's not usually recommended that you try the fasting or intermittent fasting until you get your leptin control and working properly for you. So what is leptin? So leptin is the stop eating hormone. So it's something that's secreted by your fat cells, and it actually comes from the Greek word leptos, meaning thin. So helping you to stay thin. Yes, that's what we want, absolutely. And it's like a fuel sensor for fat and carbohydrate metabolism. So your fat cells give off leptin. Leptin goes up to the hypothalamus of the brain. And when we show you that, so the hypothalamus is the part of the brain here. So, and the leptin will give that signal to the hypothalamus, and then the hypothalamus tells the rest of the body to, we've got enough food, we don't need any more, and that mechanism is something that protects us from gaining weight. Now what happens is that the more fat cells that we have, and the more that we are sending that signal to the hypothalamus, unfortunately the hypothalamus kind of says, no, I'm going to not receive that message anymore. Then what happens? Well, we never get that stop eating signal, and we keep eating and eating. And this is correlated with our ghrelin, which is our hunger hormone, and that whole mechanism gets out of whack. And this is why if you do have leptin resistance, it's not necessarily recommended to do the intermittent fasting, because you've got to probably get that leptin level where it needs to be and get that sensitivity going again. And this has a lot to do with our circadian rhythms, and I hope we do a whole episode on leptin, because it's so fascinating, and I don't think enough people are talking about the leptin response and the sensitivity that we definitely, we need to educate ourselves about this, because then it has a lot to do with our thyroid hormone, our insulin sensitivity, and it's, what came first. And often I believe it's the leptin resistance that was the initial insult and causing our brain biochemistry to not be working in the way that it should, not getting enough natural sunlight and getting too much blue light in our lives has a big difference as to how all of our hormones are working for us or against us. And certainly if we have gained a lot of weight, then this is important too, that we look into the leptin response and getting that sensitive again, so that when we, had enough to eat that our brain and the rest of our body follow suit and stops eating and then gets our metabolism going properly. So let's talk about fasting to maximize your health benefits. So what does fasting do? Well, definitely weight loss, absolutely. So there's proven benefits in the science to help with weight loss, but also our cognition and our brain and our memory even. And that was in an earlier study that we talked about in terms of with Ramadan, and this has been studied to be able to help with the cognition and the ability for memory, as well as in terms of stroke. So a study showed that there was a positive effect and a prophylactic effect with fasting on stroke and post-stroke. So that's, important when we're talking about, can we do things preventatively by fasting preventatively? So no, we haven't had a stroke yet, but, and we don't want to get diabetes, and we see here cardiovascular disease, even cancers, and Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease. So this can be very preventative by doing your intermittent fasting and doing maybe even getting into the prolonged fast as a preventative against these diseases as well, which is really fantastic. Studies have been done on cancer as well. So the way that I look at it is starving the tumor. Whenever we're feeding, we could be feeding, especially if we don't have a healthy diet, we could be feeding the tumors, if you do have cancer, with the wrong fuels and foods. So, the benefits of fasting for cancer is very promising as well. And certainly the spiritual benefits. So when we talk about being healthy and, having an overall healthy life, fasting could definitely be a part of that mind-body connection and the spiritual aspects as well, because when you are clean on the inside and, you're lessening that load of toxic things going into you, and often that does come from the diet, then it helps with having more energy and more of a connection spiritually with the energy that flows through us from Mother Earth, and certainly from whoever or whatever you pray to in terms of that higher power. And this is something that I've noticed in my own life in times of fasting. My dreams are very, relevant, and my intuition is definitely on point. So it's something that, absolutely, if you've not yet experienced that, I would love for you to experience that in terms of the ability of fasting to really help to clean house and to get you to a healthier state. And that's cleaning house, and what that is, and the term is called autophagy. So what really happens when we're fasting, part of this is autophagy, and autophagy usually starts at about 18 to 20 hours after we have restricted our food. And autophagy is a cleanup mechanism in our body, and what it does is it helps to clean up bad mitochondria without actually killing the cells. And studies have shown, and we'll show you here really quickly, that in terms of getting into autophagy and cleaning up those bad mitochondria, it's a great way for the cells to get healthier. And that's the promising thing about autophagy, is that our body is equipped with this natural process. And there's different types of autophagy, but macroautophagy, as we can see here, is conserved lysosomal degradation. So basically it means that it is the body's way of cleaning up some of those old and unneeded cells. It also helps to clean up toxic protein pieces, and it usually is best. So it can start at 18 hours, 20 hours, but it's best after 48 hours to 72 hours of not having any food. And that's the great thing about autophagy, is that we can put our body into that state and to recycle those proteins, clean up those bad mitochondria, which is again the energy cells of the body, without necessarily killing the cell. Now, sometimes autophagy does kill the cell, but if you've got bad cells, we want some of those bad cells to be killed off, and our body has the ability to do that. There's also something called hormesis. So hormesis is when we give our body a little bit of stress, then it has to react as such. And that's a good thing. We want our body to sometimes react to these stresses that we put on it. So exercise causes hormesis, fasting causes hormesis, and a study has shown that this is really effective for being able to help with stroke and that cleanup mechanism that we want to get back to that proper functioning, whether that's nerve tissues or in the musculoskeletal system. That the hormesis is something that has been proving with intermittent fasting on ischemic stroke, which we can see here. So also we can see that they've mentioned cardiovascular, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's diseases. So important again to know that it's been proven, and researchers have looked at this, and that's the benefits of fasting. Some other benefits of fasting include circadian rhythm and getting our circadian rhythm back on point. And this is so important to have a healthy circadian rhythm. It has everything to do with our metabolism, with our energy, with our hormones. So fasting really does have a benefit in this regard as well. So the studies have shown that intermittent fasting, we can see, are hypothesized to help with circadian biology, the gut microbiome. So if you've ever heard me speak before, you know that definitely I'm all about the microbiome and having a healthy microbiome, but also better sleep. And here we see an unhealthy microbiome, and this is what I call the swamp thing. And that's, a bunch of those bad bacteria, the parasites, and the viruses and all those things that definitely are top of mind, especially these days in our modern day of what's happening in the world with viruses and the pandemic. So something that definitely we have to take care of our gut microbiome. And to get to that healthier state of our microbiome, this is what we see here. We've got enough of the good guys. So the probiotics, we have a proper circadian rhythm, which affects our gut microbiome, and also, to be able to absorb our nutrients from our food and to get all of the goodness when we do eat, even when we're fasting. So when we come back to eating, we want to have that healthy microbiome so that we're actually breaking down our food appropriately and being able to absorb all of the good nutrients that we need to get from, and the protective mechanism as well from our food, like our antioxidants and everything that's good. We wanted to make sure that our microbiome is pulling that in and having that healthy effect. Plus, over 80% of our immunity comes from our gut and having that healthy microbiome. So when we talk about, being able to counteract viruses and bacteria and all those things that may be out there and come our way, we have to have that healthy microbiome, because all of that immunity is coming from the gut. And if we have that unhealthy state, then this is where people suffer when they do get sick or they do get a virus, is partially due to that unhealthy microbiome. So doing whatever you can to have that healthy gut is definitely in your best interest. And it helps with having a great night's sleep. So better sleep is definitely correlated with fasting. And again, finding that hormonal balance in terms of when we're not eating and getting into sometimes that ketotic state. So when you have, your body has to switch its mechanisms as to where it's getting its energy from. And that's essentially what ketosis is. And the liver has to switch gears and start to make its energy in a different way, and by burning off fats, which is a great thing. And so this is, the great thing about doing fasting. So whether it is intermittent fasting or prolonged fasting, is that often it's going to get you into that ketotic state, again, for a period of time, which is okay and healthy, but it can really help with that healthy night's sleep. Leptin is definitely part of that story as well. So remember, you've got to get that leptin right in terms of before you're doing the intermittent fasting to really get the best benefits of doing your fasting. So how to do intermittent fasting? How do we do it? What is the best recipe for doing this? So I like the 16-8, so 16 hours of fasting, 8 hours of eating. I think that's the easiest way to ease your way into fasting if you've never fasted before. And doing it that way is great because you know that you've got those 8 hours of eating, which it's manageable. And then just so once you stop and you're at your 8 hours and you're finished, then you have to stop, and then you are fasting, you're having water. And if you're doing dirty fasting, you might be able to sneak sneak in a coffee in there, or some other liquids, which we're going to get to in just a second, to help to get you through that fasting period. Another one is the 18-6, or also the 20 hours and 4 of the eating window. So I would say start with 16-8 if you're new to this, and certainly you can progress into the 18-6 or the 24. That's completely up to you once you've mastered the 16-8. And how are you doing this? So you're doing this not every day. So it's often nice to do this, 1 or 2 days a week at the beginning. But not necessarily. Sometimes you can, scale it back and just do it, less often. Now, some of the great liquids that are acceptable. So these would be considered the acceptable liquids with intermittent fasting. So I love to make an electrolyte drink, and I actually have it here. This is something that I often use, and even if I'm not fasting, I love to mix this up. And here I have a bit of chlorophyll. So a few drops of chlorophyll, that's not necessarily, mandatory when you make this up, but I love to drink my chlorophyll water anyways. And what I do is I'll put a bit of a flavor enhancer, but not always, and that is just naturally sweetened with a little bit of stevia. And I'll put in my magnesium. So I use a magnesium bisglycinate, and for links to the one that I use, check in the description below. We'll give you some links there. But that's what I like to do, and sometimes I'll add some potassium. So some cream of tartar, I'll add just a splash of that to help with my potassium, because you want to balance your electrolytes. And sometimes I'll put just a bit of Himalayan salt as well. So that concoction is a great way. It tastes great. It's not just water. It's not going to upset your fasting because there's no sugar in here. There's no, carbohydrate. You don't have to worry about that. So it's still fasting friendly, but it's a great way to keep your electrolytes, because that's why people sometimes will suffer and get headachy and not feel great when they're first starting fasting, is because their electrolytes get out of balance. So that's my little trick. We'll be sure to share that recipe. So I know that for those of you following, make sure that you're following me at Dr. Janine, whether you're watching me on YouTube or on Facebook or on another platform. We always will archive our shows as well. So that's important that you're following me, and we usually share the recipes on Instagram at Dr. Janine, so make sure that you're following me there. As well as water. So water is of course acceptable with intermittent fasting, and you can squeeze a little bit of lemon in your water if that helps you to make it more palatable. Some people like lime, and you could put some cucumber slices in your water and make it flavored in, but you just don't want to add any sugar or anything with sugar, because that will negate the benefits of doing the fasting. Herbal teas are great as well, but again, you don't want to be adding anything that will raise your blood glucose levels. So whether that's honey, it's not allowed, sugar certainly not allowed. So any type of sugar or sugar substitute, if it's stevia or monk fruit, that would be okay, but you don't necessarily, you have to watch that there's no other, other ingredients like maltodextrin and things that are often mixed in with the stevia, which can raise your blood glucose a little bit. So you have to be a little bit careful there. As well as coffee. So we talked earlier at the top of the show about the dirty fasting, and that's the great thing about having, and doing the dirty fast, is that you're still allowed to have coffee. Now, of course, without sugar. A little bit of cream is okay, organic cream preferably, if you like or you need to have cream in your coffee. And some people will actually have almond milk. So if I'm struggling and to get through the fast, I might make an almond milk latte. I make it myself, so I know the type of almond milk has no sugar, no carbohydrates, and I'll make it myself to make sure that I can, and it really does help, because there's something about that latte or that cappuccino, just saying, that helps. There's a bit of meatiness to it that helps to get you through that fast, and it's one of the ways that I can get through my fasting, especially if it's a prolonged fast. Knowing that I can look forward to that coffee in the morning is great for me, and that mind-body, again, connection is important. So here's the thing. So there are some mistakes that can be made when you're trying to fast, and intermittent fasting mistakes that can make you actually gain weight. And this is not something, of course, that you want. It completely defeats the purpose if you're doing your fasting to help you to lose weight. So your meal when you finish a fast is very important. So you're refeeding. The idea is not to go to the junk food, and this is really hard for a lot of people. So you've done so well and you've done your fast, and then you go to refeeding with the wrong meal. That is not recommended, because not only will it wreak havoc on your insulin, but also your liver is going to be crying and not happy. So that's not something you want to do. You want to reintroduce very gently, some healthy, clean protein, some vegetables, when you start eating again, so that you're being gentle to your body, because your body's just gone through that hormesis. It's just stopped eating for that period of time. You want to be very gentle in the way that you're reintroducing your foods. The other one is the fat-laden coffees, that you have to be a little bit careful with this when you are fasting, because it's loaded with calories. And yes, it's the healthier fats from the coconut oil. Maybe you're putting some butter in there, and it's very filling, but you have to be a little bit careful, because there are a lot of calories, and that may not always be the best way to to use that type of coffee in your fasting or when you're coming out of the fast. And also, certainly, which we talked about before, if you're leptin resistant, it's not going to work as well for you. Yes, the fasting will still work, but I want you to, try to fix that leptin resistance first before you go on the journey of fasting. You'll just get so much, better results, especially with the weight loss aspect, once your leptin sensitivity is returned back to normal. So how often should you do intermittent fasting? I touched on this earlier, but you want to cycle it. You don't want to be doing this every single day, and you definitely, don't want to get your body dependent on fasting all the time. I know that people do the OMAD, so one meal a day, for years, and I'm not sure that that's the best thing, because it down regulates your metabolism, and you may, if you go back to eating a higher amount of calories, you will gain weight, and you will gain weight very quickly. So that's the caveat of doing fasting, is that you've got to do this in a way that you're not doing it all the time, because you have to get and keep your metabolism going. So I often get the question, should I work out while I'm fasting? So yes, workouts, again, depending on where you're at in terms of what you've done, up until the point of trying your fasting, but some movement is definitely helpful. So whether that is light movement, it could be walking, it could be yoga. So yoga is fantastic because it is relaxing, but also helps to calm down the hormones and helps with, that connection with the mind, body, spirit, which I love. And depending on the type of yoga that you're doing, so some yoga is very strenuous, and other types of yoga are a little bit more relaxing to your nervous system and to your skeletal muscles. So it really does depend on the type of yoga. And when I do my fasting, I will do yoga, absolutely, but I do an intense sort of hot yoga class. I'll take it a little bit easier that day, and I follow how my body is, because our body is different from day to day. I'll just follow how my body is feeling that day, and really listen and tune into my own body to get the maximum benefits of the fasting, but of the exercise as well. Pilates is also fantastic. Any type of stretching is great, so it need not be a yoga class, but stretching is fantastic to activate those muscle fibers by doing that stretching. And walking. So walking, preferably outdoors, is the best. So for all the exercises that we're talking about, the more that you can do it outdoors, the better for you, because you want to be tuning into and tapping into your environment, helping with your circadian rhythm. You've got to get it out of that blue light environment, which is important as well, and doing it in as natural a way as possible. So, what are some supportive supplements that you can use for fasting? Well, we're going to get to that in just a second. I have a few shout outs. So shout out to Dorota Brown, Morgan Dobbin, Mary Thomas. Hello, everyone. Hi, ladies. Where are the guys? It's all ladies. I hope some guys are watching as well. But hi, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. It's so great to have you here. And if you've got questions, I'm still here. We have about 10 minutes to go. If you've got questions, flood them in now, and I will do my best to answer them. So, what are some supportive supplements that we can take for fasting? Well, one of the best ones is magnesium. So this was in my electrolyte drink. We'll be sure to share, again, this recipe so that you know exactly how I make it. But magnesium just helps to find that balance. It's also a calcium channel blocker, which is fantastic. It's a muscle relaxant and really important to be able to supplement with the right type of magnesium. So that's something that in the link below the video, we will definitely share that. Certainly if you're watching on YouTube, you'll get all of that information there. Vitamin D3 is a big one as well. So to keep our energy levels up, but this has a lot to do with our hormones and our ability to, you know, in terms of our sun exposure. Utilizing vitamin D3 in an appropriate way. Often we are not getting enough, and anybody who lives at latitudes that are not close to the equator, we are at a disadvantage. And here in Canada, certainly huge, going into a disadvantage now, going into our cold winter months. There's advantages for cold adaptation and cold exposure with thermogenesis. Yeah, we have some advantages here in Canada, but some of the disadvantages are because of that latitude that we're not getting enough of that natural sunlight exposure, and this could be, you know, have a really negative impact on our ability to be able to, you know, withstand and allow for our hormones to be properly functioning and to withstand the entire winter. So vitamin D3 is of utmost importance, especially when you're fasting, to ensure that you're getting enough and of course get that natural sunlight exposure as much as you can. Another one is DHA. So DHA has a lot to do with our eyes' ability to take in that sunlight and to turn on our circadian rhythms and to do that appropriately. It's really important in fasting as well. As much as it is a fish oil, I still like to make sure that I'm taking my fish oil supplement during the fast because it helps with my cognition. It helps to make sure that my eyes are strong. It protects the macula of my eye. And the strongest concentration of DHA in the body is actually in the eye, and there's a reason for that. And I hope to do a future show on this because it's really, you know, fascinating information to know that the body is made the way that it is, and if we look at animals in nature and with natural sunlight exposure, it has a lot to do with our body's ability to function, you know, properly and to stay healthy, but also to not get sick. Another one that I love and a supplement that's fantastic for fasting is curcumin. So curcumin helps with autophagy, which we talked about, which is our body's cleanup mechanism, which is fantastic, but the curcumin is also very supportive as an antioxidant and a natural anti-inflammatory as well during that fasting process. So that, you know, when we talk about supplements, that's a great thing. And oh wow, I've got some questions, so let me tune in really quickly here. Oh, thank you. Morgan said that you look forward to our show every Monday. Thank you. And okay, a question about apple cider vinegar. So will apple cider vinegar break my fast? No, it will not. And that's a great thing about apple cider vinegar. For those of you who love it, you can take that in the morning, really at any time, but in the morning is a way that I like to do it during your fast. And it has a lot of positive benefits for your health, which is great. And one little trick that I like to do is to mix it to bubbly water. So whether that's carbonated water or a natural, you know, bubbly spring water is a great way to do it, because then to me, it tastes like kombucha. So for whatever reason, that combination of the apple cider vinegar with the bubbles in the water is a great way to get it down, because it's a struggle for some people to take the apple cider vinegar just straight up. And if you can do it, great for you. But thank you so much, Morgan, for that question. It's fantastic. Now, when we talk in the Dr. Janine Show, we always talk about the mind-body-spirit connection. And so we're going to talk a little bit about the mental aspect of fasting and setting goals for yourself. And one of the things that I like to do, which you may have seen me talk about in another video before, is to get a nice fancy box And you're going to put in here, whether it's a picture of yourself when you are at a healthier body weight, if you're using the fasting for, doing weight loss as part of your weight loss routine, but also you can put in your goal weight and write that on a piece of paper and put it in your box. And this is called your visualization box. So you come to this box and you look at what's inside in terms of your goals and whatever goals you've set for yourself. And this will help you on your fasting journey. And that's really a fantastic tool because you have something now tangible to remind yourself of what you set your goals to be. And when you get there, it is a remarkable way to really reward yourself and to see, everything. And it reminds you as well why you're doing it, why you're doing the fasting, because it is the mental aspect of doing the fasting in the first place can be challenging, which we'll get to in just a second when I talk about the Dr. J9 truth about fasting. And setting your goal weight and having that healthy body weight is probably the number one reason why people will do fasting in the first place. But maybe you've got cancer, maybe you have MS, maybe you've got a special a distinct disease process that your body is working on repairing, and you're using fasting for the health reasons to get over that disease and to get into that healthier state. I want you to use your visualization box as well to be able to help you. And maybe you are immobilized, you're in a wheelchair, and you want to envision yourself being out of a wheelchair. You can have a picture of yourself when you weren't in that state and work towards it, and that will help to remind you always during your fasting that you're working towards that. And you'll be amazed at how well you can manifest all of that good stuff that you put in your box. It really is such a great tool for tapping into the mental aspect of why we do things in the first place and setting those goals for yourself. Now, the Dr. J9 truth, that we share this in our shows on the Dr. Janine Show, and my Dr. J9 truth is really, I'm just going to say it like it is to get over yourself when it comes to fasting, and specifically get over your fear of starving to death. That's the number one thing that comes up for people when I've counseled them in terms of, doing fasting, and that, they say, oh my God, I just can't do that. I'm going to pass out. I'm going to die. I'm not, if I'm not eating. Well, actually, our bodies are actually made to fast, and you're not going to die, because you would die every night in your sleep if that were true. We don't. When we don't eat for a period of time, usually people sleep at least 6 to 8 hours. You don't die, and you didn't eat in your sleep. So just get over that fear. And the first time, if you've not yet tried fasting, the first time that you try to fast, you may experience that fear is going to come up, and you feel hungry, and you're just not used to that, and you're used to always putting the food in to counteract that feeling of hunger. The hunger is okay. The hunger is normal. It's part of your hormonal response, but you're not going to die. So just get over it when you try and start your fasting routine. So we also are talking now about the spiritual aspects of fasting, and I'm going to bring you through really quickly a visualization that you can do. So this is a guided visualization of autophagy. So let's actually get our mind, body, spirit in cahoots with one another, and to get into that healthier state. Autophagy, again, is our body's cleanup system. So I want you to close your eyes really quickly, and I'm going to do this along with you, so just listen to me as we go through this together. So for those of you who remember Pac-Man, so Pac-Man was a video game that was probably popularized, I'm going to say, in the 80s. I don't know, somebody's going to have to correct me on that. I think it was around the 80s when home computers first came about. And there was a game that had this little yellow guy, and he had a big mouth, and he would go along this path and gobble up these little white balls. And so the Pac-Man, it was really fun to do, but that's what I want you to envision, is that Pac-Man, that little yellow blob that's going to eat away your old cells. So any cells in your body, we're going to ask our autophagy now in our body to be turned on. And we're going to ask this to happen. So if you have a place in your body that needs help, maybe you've got fatty liver. So I want you to put your hand on your right rib cage where your liver is. Or maybe you have knee pain, maybe you have headaches. Wherever your issue is in your body, I want you to put your hand on that area. And now we're going to ask ourselves to go into that autophagy, and we're going to ask those Pac-Men to do that cleanup mechanism in that tissue in our body where we may have an issue. So again, it could be on your liver, it could be on your knee, it could be in your hips, it could be the back of your neck if you get a lot of headaches. And I want you to take some deep breaths now. We're just going to take a few moments. I'm going to stop talking, and we're going to do this and allow for that Pac-Man to go into that area and really start to engage that autophagy, that cleanup process, to clean up that area of old cells. Maybe it's old mitochondria that we don't need anymore. So those powerhouses that are battery cells of our body are no longer working to our advantage, and we're tired all the time. So we're going to ask Pac-Man to go in and that autophagy to happen and to go into these areas and really clean up that tissue. And continue your deep breathing as you're doing this. You may feel some warmth. It's really amazing what happens when we actually tune into our bodies and take that time for ourselves, that we can feel warmth in our hands and on that tissue that we're actually asking for this to happen. It's really, don't underestimate the power of your own mind, body, and spirit and energetic connection to be able to help you to heal your own body and your own self. And this is something, now coming back, that you can do on your own. So you can just allow yourself, and I would recommend this at least once a day, that you go into, it's almost like a meditative state, where you really tune into your own body, especially if you've got something going on with your body, you've got bad cells. So for cancer patients, this is really important, but go into that visualization. You can play this back, listening to my voice, and really allow your body to clean up and get rid of those old dead cells with the autophagy. So I have, more people are watching. So hello, Antonetta. Hello for watching. Thank you. And Harvinda Singh from Dubai. Hello. It's so great that you are here. Thank you for tuning in. I love it when you watch the show. And sorry we were a little bit late today in starting. We had some little technical difficulties, but it's all good. We're here and we're live. And don't forget that this is archived. So our shows are always archived. I would love for you all, if you're watching now, to please share this video. So share the information, and you may not think that it's relevant to someone, but often a lot of what we're talking about is relevant to someone who is suffering and who is not feeling well. Maybe it's lack of energy, maybe they want to lose weight. So please be sure to click that share button so you can help to share this wonderful information with people who may need it. And that's, you know, giving the gift of health to someone is sometimes the absolute best thing that you can do to help them. So thank you for joining me today. It was a fantastic show all about fasting. If you have, you know, future ideas for shows, I would love to hear from you. Be sure to give me a big thumbs up. I love the fact that you've watched. Thank you for everybody who tuned in. So it was Morgan and Tanette, and we also had Harvinder, and thank you everyone for tuning in today. It was so nice to see you. And remember to always take care of your good health and to do it naturally. I'm Dr. Janine Bowering, naturopathic doctor. Thanks for joining me today.